I was never one to chase compliments, though they were often given freely. At 54, I had learned to embrace the way the world saw me, not as a younger woman, but as someone with a certain grace, elegance, and experience that others seemed to find captivating. I wasn't a cliché, not the kind of woman who clung desperately to youth. I didn't have to. The compliments that came my way, about my beauty, my confidence, the way I moved, were gifts I accepted with a quiet pride. Age had done little to dim my light. And yet, despite all of that, I lived a life that was perhaps quieter than some might expect. A career that I had built from scratch, a solid reputation in my field, and a social life that, while rich in friendships, lacked any true depth. I was used to solitude, to being in charge of my own world, with no real expectations of romantic entanglements. At my age, those things often seemed unnecessary, even unnecessary. And then there was him, Ryan. He was 23. 23 and full of promise, smart, ambitious, sharp. I was his direct superior at work, though the professional distance between us had never felt odd. He was respectful, confident, and had that unshakable youth about him, which I admired in a distant sort of way, the sort of admiration that came with recognizing how easy the world was for someone like him. Opportunities presented themselves effortlessly, doors opened just because he was who he was. He had that undeniable charm that comes with being young, the kind of charm that radiates in every room you walk into. And I was the opposite of him. Older, wiser, steady. But one evening, after a long meeting in the office, Ryan did something unexpected. "Would you like to join me for dinner?" he asked casually, as if he was inviting me to something as simple as a coffee break. I paused, taken aback for a moment. We had worked together for over a year, yet never in that time had we shared more than professional pleasantries. The idea of dining with him, just the two of us, felt strangely intimate. "I live nearby," he continued, not sensing any hesitation in my silence. "I don't want to assume, but I'd like to show you something I've been working on. It's nothing too fancy. Just a quiet evening." I studied his face, his expression open and sincere. It was a small invitation, but one that carried weight, as though he was giving me a glimpse into a world I didn't belong to. I was always hesitant to step out of my comfort zone, but something about his invitation sparked my curiosity. "All right," I said with a hint of uncertainty in my voice. "I'll come by." That decision, which seemed so trivial at the time, would lead to something I couldn't have anticipated. I remember the evening I drove to his house, how the weather had shifted from a warm, golden evening to something darker, more unpredictable. By the time I arrived at his luxury villa, the first signs of a storm were already beginning to manifest. The wind howled in the distance, and the sky had turned a bruised purple as if warning us of the chaos to come. Ryan's home was everything I'd imagined it would be, sleek, minimalist, with touches of modern sophistication. Every corner seemed designed to impress: polished floors, glass walls that offered breathtaking views of the surrounding landscape. It was the kind of place you'd expect from someone who had already achieved so much at such a young age. It almost felt like I shouldn't be there, a woman of my age, in this pristine, almost sterile environment. But Ryan greeted me with a warmth that instantly made me feel at ease. His soft chuckle as he showed me around the living room made me smile, and we quickly slipped into a conversation that seemed to flow as naturally as if we had known each other for years. He poured us wine, Chardonnay, smooth and crisp, and we sat at his dining table, which looked out over the sprawling garden, the darkening sky giving everything an eerie glow. "You know," he said between bites of dinner, his voice low and casual, "I've always admired your confidence. It's not something you see every day, especially in someone who's, well, older. I paused, unsure how to respond to the word older. It wasn't the first time I had heard it in reference to myself, but somehow hearing it from him felt different. There was no malice in his tone, no judgment, but rather an honesty that seemed to reveal a piece of him I hadn't expected. "Thank you," I replied, my voice soft. "I suppose age gives you a certain perspective, a certain calm." His eyes lingered on me for a moment, and I felt a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the usual admiration I was used to. This was something deeper, more layered. The storm outside began to grow stronger, the winds crashing against the windows, the rain beating down so heavily it sounded like the world was being pounded with a relentless force. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and I couldn't help but feel that the storm mirrored something inside me. The conversation took on a more personal tone as Ryan, ever the thoughtful conversationalist, began asking me questions about my life, about my choices, my experiences, my hopes for the future. It was the kind of conversation that people don't often have, the kind that burrows deep into your soul and makes you confront parts of yourself you might have kept hidden. And in that moment, surrounded by the sound of the storm and the warmth of the villa, I felt a connection to him that I hadn't expected. He wasn't just the young, successful man I saw at work. He was a person with depth, with vulnerabilities, just as I was. By the time dinner was over, it was clear that the storm outside wasn't going to let up any time soon. "You're welcome to stay," Ryan said, almost as an afterthought, but there was a sincerity to his words that made me hesitate. "I couldn't possibly," I began, glancing out the window at the sheets of rain. "It's no trouble," he interrupted, his smile warm. "You'll be safer here. I have a spare bedroom. There's no need to drive in this weather. It's just for tonight." I hesitated for a moment longer. The rational part of me said no, said that I should go home, sleep in my own bed. But there was something about him, something about the way he said it, that made me feel an overwhelming sense of comfort. And so, after a few moments of contemplation, I agreed. As I settled into the guest room later that night, the rain still crashing against the windows, I couldn't shake the feeling that something unexpected was unfolding. What had started as a simple dinner had turned into something more, a night that I would never have predicted, with a man I had no business getting close to. But here I was, and I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The night was still, save for the rhythm of the rain drumming against the villa's windows. The storm outside had intensified, and with it, the strange sense of intimacy that had settled between us. The wind howled, pushing the darkness around us, making the room seem smaller, warmer. Ryan had offered to show me around, but I declined, preferring the quiet comfort of the living room. The low hum of the storm made everything feel distant, as if we were the only two people left in the world. He poured us more wine, smooth, almost sweet, and I sipped slowly, the alcohol settling warmly in my chest. There was a tension in the air, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of tension you feel when two people begin to realize that there's something between them, something not easily explained. "Do you often have guests?" I asked, breaking the silence. It was a casual question, but one that gave me a glimpse into his life, his habits, his relationships, his world. "Not really," Ryan replied, his tone quiet. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving mine. "Most of the time it's just me. I've always kept to myself, you know." He paused, as if considering his next words carefully. "I don't need a lot of people around me. I prefer peace, solitude. I get enough chaos at work." I nodded. I understood that. My life had always been one of balance between public accomplishments and private solitude. But there was something about him, the way he said it, so thoughtfully, that made me wonder if his solitude was something more than just a preference. For a moment, the conversation lapsed back into comfortable silence. The air between us was thick with something unspoken, something neither of us was quite ready to acknowledge. "I'm glad you came tonight," Ryan said suddenly, his voice softer, almost vulnerable. "I'd wanted to spend more time with you outside of the office. I know this might sound strange, but I've admired you for a long time." His words hung in the air, and my breath caught in my throat. I turned my gaze to him, trying to read his expression, but there was no mistaking the sincerity in his eyes. "Admired me?" I repeated, my voice betraying the surprise I felt. "Why?" Ryan shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping lightly against the edge of his wine glass. "It's not just about your appearance, though you are beautiful, but it's more than that. It's the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you command respect. I'd always admired that kind of confidence, and it's something I've wanted to be close to." I didn't know how to respond. No one had ever spoken to me this way, not in such a direct, personal manner. Most of the time, compliments were surface level, given out of politeness. But Ryan's words carried weight, and I found myself unsure of how to handle this unexpected attention. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice quieter than before. "You're younger than me, much younger." Ryan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I know, and I've thought about it a lot. The age difference, the professional boundaries. But none of that changes how I feel." He leaned forward slightly, his voice low but steady. "I've wanted to tell you this for a long time. I just didn't know how." The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard, and for a moment I was speechless. Ryan, this young, successful man, so full of promise and ambition, was confessing something so deeply personal to me. It felt surreal, like the world outside had faded away, and it was just the two of us, sharing a moment that was so raw, so real. "I'm not sure what to say either," I murmured. "I've never thought about you that way. I mean, I've always seen you as my colleague, as someone I work with. This is also unexpected." Ryan's expression softened, and he smiled, though it was a smile tinged with sadness. "I get it," he said. But I had to say it. I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't feel this way about you. You've always intrigued me, and I think there's more here than just admiration. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. This wasn't the kind of situation I was used to navigating. I had lived a life where relationships were carefully planned and executed, where emotions were managed, not left to run wild. But this was different. Ryan wasn't asking for anything, not really. He was simply laying his truth out in front of me, allowing me the space to process it however I wanted. "Ryan," I began, my voice softer now, "I don't know what you expect from me. I don't know if I can give you what you're asking for." He held up a hand, stopping me. "I don't expect anything from you. I just needed to tell you how I feel. What happens after that is up to you. I won't push. I respect you too much for that." His words, though simple, were heavy with meaning. In that moment, I realized that he wasn't just a young man attracted to an older woman. He was someone who had been carrying this burden quietly, someone who had respected my boundaries all along. And yet here he was, trusting me with the truth of his feelings. The silence stretched between us, and for the first time that evening, I felt the weight of our connection. The storm outside was no longer a backdrop to the conversation. It was part of the atmosphere now, echoing the turbulence inside me. The storm had finally passed, leaving only the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows. The air was cooler now, the oppressive heat of the evening replaced by a refreshing stillness. But inside, I felt anything but still. My mind was racing, and my heart was heavy with the emotions I had been too afraid to acknowledge. Ryan had stayed true to his word. He didn't push for anything more. After his confession, we had both retreated into a quiet space, each lost in our thoughts. Eventually, I made my way to the guest room, my mind buzzing with what had transpired. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the night pressing down on me. I had never considered myself the kind of woman who would entertain a relationship with someone so much younger than me. In fact, I had often dismissed the idea as impractical, even absurd. What would I have in common with someone like Ryan? What could we possibly share that would make such a relationship work? And yet, as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but wonder if my ideas about love, relationships, and connection were too rigid. Perhaps it wasn't about age or expectation. It was about the bond between two people. Could I allow myself to experience something I had dismissed out of hand for so long? The storm had passed, but my thoughts were still tumultuous. As I lay there, I realized that I wasn't just processing Ryan's confession. I was processing my own feelings. His words had cracked open something inside me, something I hadn't even known was there. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of possibility, a spark of excitement, of curiosity about what might come next. When I woke the next morning, the storm had long since cleared, and the villa was bathed in soft, golden light. Ryan was already up, his demeanor calm and collected, as if the events of the previous night hadn't shifted anything in him. Perhaps he had expected me to retreat, to distance myself, but I wasn't sure I was ready to do that. We sat together in the kitchen, the morning sun filtering through the windows as we shared coffee and small talk. There was no awkwardness between us, no tension, just two people who had shared something deeply personal and had come out the other side with a sense of mutual respect. "I need to go," I said finally, breaking the silence. "I've thought about everything, and I think I need to be on my own for a while. I need time to process." Ryan nodded, understanding. "I get it," he said softly. "Take all the time you need." And with that, I left, but I didn't leave with the same person who had arrived the night before. I had learned something about myself, about what it meant to be open to possibilities, to challenge the boundaries I had placed on myself. Ryan had opened a door, one that I didn't know was there. As I drove back to my own home, I realized that I was no longer afraid to face the unknown. Life had a way of surprising you, and maybe, just maybe, I was ready for whatever came next.